when algorithms make the decisions. No debate, no hesitation, no second thoughts. Somewhere in the background, an algorithm evaluates the data, calculates the outcome, and acts, often before anyone realizes a decision was needed at all. Today, algorithms decide who gets loans, which trades execute, what content spreads, and how capital moves across the world. To understand why this moment matters, we have to examine how decision-making quietly migrated from human judgment to machine logic. Because when algorithms began deciding outcomes, authority changed shape without asking permission. For most of history, decisions carried human fingerprints: bias, intuition, experience, emotion. Even flawed choices allowed room for explanation and appeal. But digital systems offered something different: speed, scale, consistency. Once data could be processed faster than thought, judgment became a bottleneck, and algorithms stepped in to remove it. The reveal began when automated decision systems moved beyond assistance and into authority. Trading algorithms stopped suggesting actions and started executing them. Credit systems stopped advising risk and started approving or denying access instantly. Governance mechanisms began enforcing outcomes based purely on predefined inputs. The human role shifted from decider to designer. At first, this felt like progress. Fewer delays, less corruption, more efficiency. Algorithms didn't get tired. They didn't panic. They didn't negotiate. They followed rules exactly as written. But those rules carried assumptions about fairness, value, and acceptable risk that were rarely questioned once embedded. As adoption accelerated, decisions became harder to trace. Outcomes appeared without explanation. Systems responded to patterns invisible to human perception. Appeals became impossible because there was no one to appeal to. The logic lived inside models few people could fully interpret. What emerged was not a takeover, but a handover. Humans still wrote the rules, but machines enforced them at scale. And once enforcement became automatic, choice itself began to feel abstract. The world was entering an era where decisions didn't feel made, they felt triggered. And that subtle shift was about to reshape how power, responsibility, and accountability were understood. As algorithmic decisions spread, their influence seeped into everyday life in ways few people consciously noticed. A transaction cleared instantly. A loan was denied without explanation. A trade executed before a human could react. Outcomes arrived fully formed, detached from any visible decision-maker. What once felt like choice now felt like inevitability. The conflict emerged when people realized these systems did not understand context. Algorithms optimized for efficiency, not empathy. They measured patterns, not intentions. A model trained on historical data inherited historical bias. A rule designed for stability could amplify harm under unusual conditions. Yet once deployed, these systems acted with unwavering confidence. Institutions embraced automation because it reduced friction and liability. If a system made the decision, no individual could be blamed. Responsibility dissolved into process. Appeals turned into error tickets. Accountability became abstract. For organizations, this was protection. For individuals, it was disorientation. In decentralized systems, the shift went even further. Decisions were no longer made by managers or committees, but by mechanisms encoded directly into protocols. Interest rates adjusted automatically. Collateral was liquidated without negotiation. Governance votes executed outcomes regardless of minority dissent. The system did not weigh arguments. It counted inputs. Defenders argued that this was fairness at scale. Algorithms treated everyone the same. No favoritism, no exceptions, no corruption. But critics pointed out the flaw. Treating everyone the same only works when starting conditions are equal. In reality, they rarely are. Automation flattened nuance along with bias. As these systems matured, people adapted their behavior to the algorithms themselves. Traders optimized strategies for machine reactions. Creators shaped content for ranking systems rather than audiences. Participants learned how to game models they didn't understand, chasing incentives instead of meaning. Decision-making became a dialogue between humans and machines, each reacting to the other. The emotional toll grew quietly. People felt judged by invisible criteria, accepted or rejected without reason. Power felt distant, embedded in systems too complex to question and too fast to challenge. Trust shifted again, not toward institutions, but toward predictions about how algorithms would behave. The world had not lost human agency. It had narrowed it. Choice existed, but only within boundaries defined by code. And as algorithms continued deciding outcomes at scale, society faced a growing discomfort. If machines decide, who is responsible when they're wrong? As algorithms tightened their grip on decision-making, the cracks in this new order began to show. Systems optimized for efficiency started colliding with realities they could not predict. Edge cases multiplied. Rare events triggered extreme outcomes. And when things went wrong, there was no intuition to intervene. Only logic executed without pause. The conflict deepened when algorithmic decisions produced consequences no one intended, yet no one could reverse. Automated liquidations wiped out positions in seconds. Recommendation engines amplified misinformation faster than it could be corrected. Governance mechanisms executed votes that communities later regretted. The systems behaved exactly as designed, and that design became the problem. People began asking harder questions. Who audits the assumptions behind these models? Who decides which variables matter? Who is accountable when a rule encoded years ago causes harm today? The more complex the algorithms became, the harder it was to answer. Transparency existed in theory, but comprehension lagged far behind execution. In decentralized systems, this tension felt sharper. There were no executives to question, no courts to intervene. Once thresholds were met, outcomes were final. The same automation that removed corruption also removed mercy. Communities watched decisions unfold in real time, powerless to stop them, forced to accept that participation meant consent to outcomes they could not control individually. Meanwhile, a new class of influence emerged. Those who understood the algorithms gained power not by authority, but by prediction. They anticipated outcomes, positioned themselves ahead of execution, and shaped behavior indirectly. Power shifted from decision-makers to system interpreters, people who could read patterns others could not see. Emotionally, trust began to fracture, not in the technology itself, but in the distance between designers and users. Many felt governed by systems they never agreed to, optimized for goals they never chose. The promise of neutrality faded as it became clear that every algorithm reflected values, trade-offs, and priorities embedded by someone, somewhere. The build-up reached a critical point when society recognized a dangerous imbalance. Decisions were accelerating, but understanding was not. Systems were acting faster than humans could reason about their consequences. And in that gap between execution and comprehension, risk was quietly compounding. The question was no longer whether algorithms should make decisions. They already were. The question was how humanity could regain agency in a world where outcomes were triggered long before reflection could begin. The turning point came when people finally accepted that algorithms were not tools to be trusted blindly or feared irrationally. They were mirrors, reflecting the values, incentives, and assumptions embedded within them. And once that was understood, the conversation shifted from control to responsibility. The climax revealed a sobering truth. Algorithms did not remove human judgment. They displaced it in time. Decisions were still made by people, just earlier, during design rather than execution. Every parameter was a choice. Every threshold a value judgment. And once deployed, those choices echoed at scale. Out of this realization, new approaches began to emerge. Systems were designed to be interpretable rather than opaque. Execution was slowed intentionally in high-impact scenarios. Human override layers were introduced, not to negate automation, but to reintroduce accountability. The goal was not to weaken algorithms, but to align them more closely with human values. The resolution reframed agency in an automated world. Power no longer belonged solely to those who acted fastest, but to those who designed wisely. Participation meant understanding the systems you relied on. Literacy became protection. Transparency became leverage. Algorithms would continue making decisions. That was inevitable. But society began learning how to question them, audit them, and live alongside them without surrendering responsibility. Automation matured from novelty into infrastructure, and infrastructure demanded stewardship. When algorithms make the decisions, the real question is not what they will do. It's who decides what they're allowed to decide. Subscribe to join the journey. When